All right. We might clear this today.
Heck,
I'm excited. This is good. So, trigger warning. It'll take you back to first semester.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Little foundations of therapy class.
Oh, no, not that one. I thought you were bringing it back to the DSM-5. And I was like, that's
That
fine.
was fine. Foundation?
No, I will not count you out. Because there are a lot of systemic concepts from that class. And what most of us love to do.
You all right there, champ?
Sorry.
What most of us love to do these days is just kind of jump to modern day models. So a lot of people just like foundations, we got to get through it, survive it, and then contemporary and things that I've already learned about. Let's go with that. And most of you know, I dove deep into IFS while I was here. Picked up interpersonal neurobiology as I came out of school, but I did learn in my time, because anytime I get reminded of an older theory, all of a sudden I go to sessions and I can find an application in every single session that I'd be like, oh, that would be really helpful here. And then all of a sudden I'm using it in 3 sessions in a row. And I remember last year being behind the mirror, and one of the students was just really feeling stuck. Like, we are not getting anywhere, and I'm just sitting there like, structural therapy. Like, it was as clear as day for me. I was like, that would fit perfect here. So after the session, we collaborated. Like, I was behind the mirror, let's talk about it. And I said, have you ever thought about, this is what I saw, would you consider doing some structural therapy? And the look I got was like, yeah, but what is structural therapy? So I ended up doing staffing and doing a recap for the entire cohort. No, we did that in the fishbowl. So I got on the whiteboard and I was and doing structural therapy. And then I went the next week and watched the session, and there she was at the board doing structural therapy, and it was really going well in a whole new direction. I was like, yes. So, most of us aren't going to hold on to one of the foundational models, but this is where I still ask you, and that's why I do the reflections the way I do. You can disagree with something, but what's the understandable part? Or what's the valuable part that you don't want to lose out on? There's some good things out of the old theories, even though most of us, that's not what we hold on to as our base anymore. There's still some of these that when I remember, like, shoot, yeah, I shouldn't have let that one go. I need to bring that more in. So anyway, this is really the family therapy class. All right, so you have a couples class. A lot of times, you should be able to apply a lot of the contemporary, but it's interesting how some of the contemporary can easily favor individuals more, and people get stuck more in the individual models, even though you really can and should apply them more systemically and do them in family therapy. But I want to bring us back to some of our systemic concepts and I want you to think about how could the following systemic concepts inform family therapy. Okay? So basically pair or triple up with somebody nearby, and I've got 2 slides of this. So I want you to look at this. I'm going to give you like 3 or 4 minutes just to kind of look over this and kind of talk about which ones stand out to you and how you think some of these might inform family therapy, and then I want to kind of bring it back and talk about it together as a group. So how might process versus content inform family therapy? How might a genogram inform family therapy? Systemic context like home and school, Grafenberger type stuff. Stages of the life cycle, different ages, family structure, subsystems and boundaries, structural therapy, abuse, gender, culture, how might that play in? Take 3 or 4 minutes, pair up, triple up, somewhere in that, and talk a little bit about how these systemic concepts might play in.
You can join Katie and Kylie, so you're not totally left out. This is like what vloggers gotta feel like.
When you're in their computer.
Yeah. Like, I'm not actually talking to someone, but I know it's going to someone.
Okay.
She's going to see it at some point.
Yeah. Okay. also just have to talk about how could the following systemic concepts inform family therapy.
Yeah, I think we can pick a couple of them.
I don't know. I'm just going to the genogram because it's like one of the only things I can remember. But just like showing you like patterns of your family and
That's what I thought too, especially with like parents. And then if they start talking about their parents, and then they're like, oh, maybe I'm starting to repeat some of these same behaviors. Yeah, for sure. And then stages of the life cycle to like what ages, like again, kind of comparing. It's not fair to keep comparing everyone to different life cycle stages because they could hit different milestones, and that's okay for that child.
Everybody's different, and it's not everything is gonna be like society says it is.
Yeah.
Family structures. Do we have to do this one too? Is it just this slide we're doing, or the second one too?
I was gonna put. So I'm gonna add the second slide. Feedback loops and circular causality. Ooh, that's a fun one. Family
Just
rules
so
and
you know
narratives,
where we're
social
at. Oh, you
constructions,
can't see.
homeostasis,
It's in systemic
attachment theory,
models
triangles,
of week
differentiation,
3, I believe.
function of the system. Remember all
It's
these?
the last two slides.
First semester.
No, actually, I don't.
Homeostasis, like just like informing people that like you might be repeating the same patterns because that's what you're used to, that's your normal,
And they don't want to break those patterns.
and most people don't like change or doing things differently. And like triangulation.
How is the symptom function? So you
Keeping-
as a person, and yeah, they kind of have symptoms.
Keeping the third person out of your situation, keeping outside sources out of your situation, and
Yes, and just even bringing to light triangulation
Yeah.
in that role, because sometimes I don't think parents realize how much they do it,
Yeah.
or even siblings
Mhm.
can do it. So sometimes if they're just not even aware that they're doing that at home, or it's kind of perpetuating itself.
I love that for you.
And then what about like feedback and circular?
I don't remember the definitions of this stuff.
can't do audiobooks because of that.
Like the feedback effects. That's like how they're getting and giving out like information. You know?
Oh, like how like you process information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
That's what I mean. It's like surface level. I can kind of remember, but that, and then like family rules, narrative, social construction.
Just like
I feel like that pertains to like, so say the parents come in, one parent can have one narrative for
Yeah.
how they feel like the person is, and another parent can have a totally different narrative.
and like just how society runs and
14-year-olds and 11-year-olds.
trying to pull.
So then coming into family therapy, that could be definitely a huge.
Go ask your mom, go ask your dad, go ask your mom, go ask your dad.
Remember what the difference
I
is.
know. I'm like
or how it
I
pertains to family therapy.
I remember this stuff. I just don't remember what
Like
it
I remember
means.
all the terms, and I'm just like, I don't know what he's looking for an answer necessarily.
And like attachment theory, like knowing the different, like what they are, how they form.
Parents may not even understand their attachment theory, let alone
Exactly.
their child.
Yes, and just I don't know. I feel like since like I've been like aware of what my attachment theory is, I'm like, oh, like that. I feel like I touch in 3 different attachment theories
Right.
for sure.
Some people are one, some people definitely fit into one category, and then
Yeah.
to know like it can change a little bit or alter a little bit depending on if you work on stuff.
Sorry, Kylie. We're kind of
There's a
forgetting.
lot of stuff.
forgetting all this stuff. But
Yeah, think about the triangulation between with AFib or AMAB, and my sister used to have her friends over divorced. She's like 8 years old. So she used to bathe this thing on her tractor when she was bathing. Supposed to do that. Sometimes my dad like came home early, and then she just yells how to place because everyone had like a designated dissecting. Did you hear this? Because everybody would just say hi because she like had a silent case that never happened. Dude. So everyone just knew what they were doing, and then my dad was like for 30 minutes. They hit for 3 minutes. Oh, that's commitment.
All right, I'm going to pull us back together here for time's sake.
I currently only have one is impressive parent, one mother that likes me.
So let's start with, here you go, Kylie.
oh,
You can see the board. Maybe. All right. So systemic models, systemic concepts. All right. If we're working with a family system, we should probably be rooting ourselves in some of the family concepts that are a part of our tradition. Otherwise, we're the mental health counseling program. No disrespect to mental health counseling program. But
No,
No,
disrespect is a tree. No, it's a tree. All the disrespect.
No. So, we got 6 things on this page. I'm not necessarily going to go through all of them in detail. What stood out to you? How could the following systemic concepts inform family therapy?
I think we felt like all of it was like super related and helpful to think of, like they were all right. Period. I mean, like there wasn't anything like if you're in the interest of being brief, amen to all of them.
Well, give me a little bit more. I'm going to be
I
brief.
think the systemic context you said, like with the mesosystem and all the systems, like
Yep.
we all have that in our systems and our circles like widen. But as a child, a lot more people in their systems will be influencing them. So like teachers, grandparents, church, neighbors, kids, their friends, their peers, influence them more than maybe our peers as adults.
Mhm.
Like it was like. I think you mentioned you've had teachers, like you've talked to teachers,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay, what else?
I just want to say, if you're over there, could you talk a little bit louder so Kylie can hear you?
Sorry, Kylie.
We talked about, I mean,
Louder.
I'm here. I agreed everything fits so perfectly, but like I feel like the genogram really stuck out to me at least, and just how you can look back at your family and maybe see that you're repeating some patterns that your family might be repeating. Might learn some history about yourself and your family. It's just a good tool to use to learn a little bit more about where you come from and the people you surround yourself with.
Okay, all right. So it could be a
I was gonna just tag on to the genogram thing.
louder.
So like depending on the age of the kid, we kind of discussed how genograms could be tough if you want to approach it in like the typical way. Like I think you're gonna have to get more creative when you're trying to fill out a genogram with young kids. Like maybe not even tell them that that's what you're doing because they won't understand. And just kind of
Let's paint a tree.
Yeah, like let's just
Yeah.
make an activity out of it. So I don't know. We talked about the creativity that would be required sometimes with that.
I like that. Create children, adolescents. Take what we do with adults. That's a sad thing. We'll get into that when we get to the adolescent material. You got to get our creativity back, even with adults. It's just an overall type thing. Good. What else? Anything else? Process versus content. Really easy to get. I tell people, do not become a detective. People get launched into storylines and they feel like they just got to mine all the details and they take their eyes off of what's happening in the room. Remember that mother-son I said came back? Just this last week, and I saw mom first because she needed to kind of unload, and then I saw mom and the student. And mom was really sharing from her perspective, and the student did actually an excellent job of expressing what they were feeling, what their experience, how mom was at things that mom was doing was actually landing, how she was over functioning. Mom kind of got in explanation mode and things like that. And mom got caught in the content and kind of got caught in the back and forth debate mode. And I was able to kind of hit the pause button and really, step back and say, I want you to notice kind of how that conversation went. So I stopped talking about the content and I started talking about how the conversation was playing out and whether, is it more important to kind of talk about the details of this or what people are experiencing? What are you really trying to get at? And that was a way to kind of bring her back out because, she's a single parent. Her job requires a lot of her. So and her job is it's part of the medical community, and we're going to do what needs to be done and look for that. And so we had to pull her out, not what's the solution based on your medical professional eyes, because that's what the boy was saying was basically, you just tell me what my problems are, and then you get ahead and you try to solve them all. And you don't even understand. You don't see me and what I'm experiencing. And so then we started talking about the process and agreed that we're going to come back next week, or this week, and we're going to look more at the process. Genograms can be helpful. I wish I had a little time to tell this story, like stages of life cycle. Like what ages are they? Very briefly. This is not universal, but it kind of is. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Where there are some things that, yes, they kind of land, but then I've always seen so many exceptions. I avoid trying to create boxes that stick things in. But, so having 4 kids myself, when my oldest 2 boys were kind of in the 10 to 15 range, okay, when they got in the middle of that, World War II broke out. All of a sudden, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. My sweet little girls, my 2 youngest are my girls, and they were just, life, happy as can be. Then my oldest kind of went past the 15 into the 16, and it's like, I'm not doing this anymore. As much as the brother was still trying to come, like, I'm creating separation, starting to push away from that. Well, guess what was entering that range? The oldest daughter. Boom, 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 boom. They were going at it. And I still had my youngest who's happy. Not quite so much anymore. And then it took a little bit longer for my second son to say, I'm done and pull out of it. But then he eventually created that separation. Like, I'm not going to do this with you anymore. Right as a younger sister was coming in. Boom, 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 boom. And again, this one gets to the end of high school. Unfortunately, there's nobody behind other than the dog. So she kept trying, and so it was a little bit harder for the older to pull away. But I often tell that story in therapy because people will say about, these 2, and they're just like, this doesn't feel normal. My gosh, the way that they're treating each other, the way they're going at it, and I go, what ages are they? It always falls right in that age range. And so then I'm able to kind of tell this brief story to kind of normalize. Like, yep, and because there's just a developmental piece, so development too, stages of life cycle, what's happening. So that's one of many stories that you can tell, but just an example of how you might take something that you've experienced or a concept that you know and try to make it real and bring it home to people. So I've had a lot of parents that are like, oh, so that's normal? Like, I'm not a bad parent because I can't stop them from, just whacking on each other and saying the negative things? No, that's normal. And by the way, every 8th grader hates you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a given.
They stomp upstairs, I hate you, you're the worst in the world. Universal. All right. Family structures, subsystems, and boundaries. Subsystems and boundaries. So you remember the executive subsystem, which is often the parental system, and then you've got more of the child subsystem, but you can have a parent, with one or more of the students, and you can have a cutoff with the other parent, or you can have all kinds of shapes and forms. That can be a really helpful concept. Anything from this you want to highlight? What stood out to you there?
Could you kind of explain the first one? Because we were trying to and could not remember it.
Yeah. Well, I used to love to do this in therapy. Because positive and negative feedback loops. Basically, I do something, and then I get a feedback from you on how'd you take that? I got to go back and restudy this. I don't have it highly in detail, but basically, I make an action or I make words, and then you kind of give a feedback on how that landed for you.
Okay, we were pretty.
Yep.
You're right.
So you go back. So do I have a marker anywhere?
It's up on the desk, I think.
Oh,
Or next to the.
oh, gotcha. Thank you. Okay. But one of my favorites is just kind of the circular causality or the loops that people get caught in. So use this with couples, you can use this with parents and teens or any relational work that you're doing. So you have a conflict. So somebody does something with an S, okay? Somebody says something, somebody does something, okay? And that creates a cycle. So then, let's start with person number 1 does something. So then there's a reaction by person number 2. Okay, right? And then based on how person number 2 reacts, then it's going to cause a counter reaction by person number 1, which will then cause another reaction by person number 2. And you can either have them kind of come back, or you might have a fight, you might have a flight. There's different ways that people respond. But it's very easy for all of us to get caught in these circular cycles. We just kind of do the same thing over again. I say this, you respond this way. I respond to what you did, then you respond to what I did, and then it starts all over. And you can, there can be an on-ramp from multiple different places. They can start different places, but as soon as you get into it, relational systems tend to create cycles. So as a therapist, what's our role? Because if they're coming in and saying, this is a negative cycle for us, we don't like this anymore. We don't want to keep doing this. And I'll map out, okay, how did this start? Who said the first thing? Well, this partner said this to me. Okay, what did you do in response to that? Well, I hate when they do that. And so then I responded this way. Now, what did they do when you did that? Well, whenever I do that, this is how they just take it to another level and go this direction, and then I'm out of there, and I do this, and then that really throws them off. They get really mad, and then they do this. So you're helping them map out the cycle. So then, what do we do in any kind of system to kind of break that? You got to figure out where we put the wedge in it to break the cycle. And what you're explaining to people is this is the cycle. You've created a homeostasis based on this, right? This is just what you're used to. This is how your family functions, but you're saying you don't like it. So our job is to figure out how to identify the spot where we can put the wedge where either you're stopping doing this or you're shifting how you react. And are they going to end up with a circular cycle eventually? Think about it. We all get into patterns in life, right? Our classes get into patterns. Everything we do tends to get into patterns. Let's just create a new cycle that actually works for you and is more positive. Okay? So circular causality.
So with your family clients, do you do psychoeducation like that, or do you just provoke them
sure.
into a new cycle?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You do the psychoeducation.
Often this work, if a teen's in the room, young kids will be play with it, you give them something to play with, and sometimes you're talking to the parents more during the process. but mapping it out and looking what it looks like. Homeostasis. We get caught in just our pattern of how we do things. It's dysfunctional, but it works for us. And again, I was just working with one of my supervisees, and we were reviewing one of their cases in Vault, and it blew up this week, and we determined that was actually a good thing. They took 2 individual clients, they forced a parent and a child to be together for 15 minutes, and they had already done one session that they didn't like. The parent tried to call in and said, we're not going to do it. They were talked into doing 15 minutes. They did 15 minutes together. The parent went into their individual and started yelling at the therapist. You ready for this? It's fun. But, awesome session. This is a client that frustrates one of the therapists because guess what? They ask question after question after question. Very little talk, very little answer. I don't know. Very frustrating because they don't feel like they can get anywhere. Now this client was engaged. And this is one of their goals, to communicate with their child. But they broke the homeostasis. Sometimes we have to be uncomfortable for change to happen. So that can be hard as a therapist. We want people to feel good, right? We want to make things nice and rosy for everybody. And in the end, hopefully, you can really make things good. But sometimes you have to break the homeostasis to help it get there. And I got to do this one just for fun. I need 2 people with me, really quick. Grab one. Grab it in. Okay. Oh, I need one more.
One more person?
Oh.
One more cable.
Okay. So I remember doing this in my cohort. So we're kind of even right now, right? Okay, somewhat. Not so much.
Oh no!
We broke our family. All right.
Sounds about right.
So here we are. Okay. So we have a nice even triangle with each other. What happens when these 2 get closer to one another? What does that do to me? Right. It changes the triangle. So hopefully you got, did you ever get this imagery? I was looking for a rubber band. Because I remember being taught this using a rubber band. And you put that between 3 fingers and you just keep changing it up and you realize that for 2 people to get closer, it typically means that one person gets, now if you move further apart and get more equidistant, then that kind of pulls me back into the system and now we can relate to each other in different ways. Okay?
Yep, and also the rubber band puts more tension.
Right. Yeah. That's why I was like, okay, these are going to kind of work, but not really.
Yeah.
But you kind of got the idea?
That's how you do it, right,
So,
Katie?
yeah. So I just wanted to bring in a little bit of a visual of triangulation. So thank you, my amazing subject.
Awful.
But we often can identify that in family systems. That's the first thing. Please sit wherever you'd like. Oh, look, those 2 are close together on the couch, and that one's all the way across the room in the chair. That's why you want to have enough furniture in your office. A lot of people will just have their chair and maybe a couple other spots. You don't necessarily get extra information that way. So I know it's a little bit more expensive, but I've always liked it. Well, no, I used to have a couch and 2 chairs and then my chair. Now I have a couch, a love seat, and 2 chairs. And part of that is I'm always curious where people are going to sit and where the dynamic is playing out.
Would it mean anything if you like busted out the beanbag chairs
I was
and
gonna
people
say.
just generally wanted to sit on them?
Go for it.
Yeah. Would that like mess anything up though?
No.
Like that's way more fun and I want to sit there.
That tells you
But
something, though.
It does, but not about the sitting close to anybody thing. So it would work one way, but wouldn't it deter another way if the beanbag chair wasn't?
No, if they're coming into an uncomfortable place, for them to sit by somebody else instead of going for that,
Okay.
Shows they're comfortable there. They can't, they don't quite have the safety to go off. So that's maybe a safer person for them.
It also could be like they're really restrictive and have to sit a certain way on the couch at home, but they don't have these fun things. So
I
they're
love
like,
the ones when parents are like, nope, this is how you sit in Mr. Bryan's office. And I'm just like, I don't care.
Mr. Brian.
I know. Well, I get called that a lot. Or Dr. Bryan,
Not
Oh,
yet.
yeah. Everyone thinks their therapist is a doctor. Like
Yeah.
And that's
being
so
a-
funny to
Yeah.
me.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
super common, especially kids.
Well, you know, adults
Would you
too.
like
At the
to work?
clinic, they're like, "Oh, I'm here to see Dr. Gray." I'm like, "She got a master's
got one of
degree."
those.
She got a master's degree.
Amazing.
Does Dr. Dre have a doctorate?
Dr. Gray does not.
Dr. Dre.
Oh, Meredith. Of course he
If
does.
you can do that, then.
Yeah.
All right. And one of my other favorite ones is the family rules and narratives. Dive in. Again, we can just kind of project. We can kind of just assume our set, idea of what family rules are or should be, and just kind of assume families come in and think we know. But oh my gosh, is there such a variety in what expectations are and how families function and operate? So spend some time to get to know what the family rule, what are the expectations, what are the family rules, what's the story that they tell themselves about different things. So it's just all those systemic concepts. Don't lose sight of some of the. Just go back to. Did you still use nickels? Yeah, I think they might be changing that, but that's the
Thank
classic.
God. You don't love the Nichols book? I don't love old white men.
True.
I mean, you're not old though. How old are you, Brian?
Wait, you said you
Oh,
were
here's a
49?
fun game.
Wait, didn't you
Oh,
say
How old is Brian?
49?
How'd you know that?
Because you said it earlier.
I wouldn't have guessed that. I was like,
Yeah, because
I'm
I thought you were like
36 and
45
I'm always,
or
yeah.
maybe even younger. You
I-
don't
I-
look
I would-
49.
Some 43,
You're not gray yet.
Me too.
Little bit.
There you go.
So, and my brother's 11 years older than me, and his hair still looks the same as mine. I'm like,
Nice.
I got 11 more
That's a good
years.
sign.
I
11
just
more
watched
years.
him. He's a little bit more gray here.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's 10 minutes, really quick. So one important piece, I couldn't do this until we got to this slide. So reminders, what's due next Tuesday, February 20th at 2 p.m., beginning of class. We're on to reflection number 4, by the way. So you can thank the scammer, you all got a free 10 points for reflection number 3.
Yeah.
And so reflection number 4, behavior, working with children and parents, systemic models. We're going to look really briefly at trauma, ethics, and culture. We're probably going to have to hit a little bit more of that next week. So do your reflection on everything that we talked about today. So encompasses what was supposed to be over the last 2 weeks that all got condensed into today. And then diversity article number 4. That's our second to last one. We'll have one more after that. And then we'll be done with that assignment. So keep looking. That was my life. Once I got into child and adolescent stuff, I just loved, I got introduced to one thing, I'd find out, I'd read that, and I want to learn more about this, and I'd get more information. So just keep broadening yourself. Okay? Whoops. So I have to get to EI woo-woo today.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Ignore the first one, because I decided just not to, I wanted to keep it on there. Last year, my wife actually had the time, because I taught a morning class. So Jen was able to come in, and she talked about EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, a very evidence-based brief trauma therapy. And she has learned a lot about, she's not a play therapist, but part of her training works with some young people, works with a neurodivergent, almost nonverbal students, so has had to work a lot on how do I communicate with play, sandbox and things like that to tell stories. So she was able to come in last year, and I'm sorry, just a Tuesday afternoon, there's no way she could clear that. But fortunately, Tammy will be here in 2 weeks. The early childhood person, is going to come join us and give us some other perspectives. But with trauma, Do you know there's pre-verbal trauma? Hopefully that makes sense. So she's getting extra training at this side of things because she's had some clients where she has a consult person that she does work with, and she was explaining the story like, I don't know where, like I'm doing float backs. So basically you're taking a trauma, and then there's usually traumas layered on traumas, so you do things called float backs to kind of, this trauma is kind of standing on this one, and so you can work on this one, but you can also, if you can work your way back and then loosen this, it can start to loosen everything above it. So you're kind of doing float backs, and all of a sudden, she had one session where she just had a woman jump out of the couch and go, I have to go to the bathroom. She just ran to the bathroom. Like, what just happened? She worked with her supervisor on that. She goes, oh, you triggered a pre-verbal trauma. It's not in her language. It was in her body. And her body all of a sudden, so she had to go to the bathroom because her body was starting to release that trauma. So there are things you might choose to be EMDR trained. I did it right after graduation. I was supposed to do that 10 I haven't had the time and money over the last 10 years. Plus there's another training I want to get before I do this, but she went and did it right away. But there are certain things you can do. So with children, okay, trauma gets stuck in certain parts of the brain. And guess what sitting here and talking doesn't do? How many parts of the brain does this activate?
Like one.
Right, we're using our language. If I start talking and I'm using movement, what's being added? Play.
Dance.
Play dance. Woo! All right?
I got this all on video.
Oh, hey! Thank you very much.
Kylie better share this with them.
I'll share with everybody.
Just
So,
cut out
yeah.
that little-
So, play-focused therapy and movement-type things while we're talking. Sarah, my colleague, graduated with my wife and is at our location. She's had a young 8-year-old, really struggled. Like, what do I do with this person? All of a sudden, outside the building, throwing a football back and forth, kid will not shut up. All of a sudden, it completely opened things up. So movement and talking are huge. So when we have trauma, not just sitting somebody in a chair and saying, tell me your trauma, but a lot of times that's an EMDR is using bilateral stimulation. You can do that in a variety of ways. You can put paddles in your hands and go back and forth. There's a lot of ways that we can get the bilateral stimulation of the brain, because when you get the different parts of the brain activating together while you're storytelling, it unlocks the part of the brain where the trauma got stuck. So that's a very brief, not highly educated, or kind of, listening to Jen. I know enough of it, but I can't give it you in detail. We've already talked about attachment, that concept of being seen, so important. Soothed and safe. I think for myself, and people have confirmed this for me, I am not an uber guru in therapy techniques. Okay? What do I give people? What is my strong suit in therapy? I give people my nervous system. The nervous system that got me through the thing that we talked about at the beginning of class today. That crazy things are happening, and I don't know how I got this, because I've got highly challenging things in my background, and somehow my nervous system. And so, but I'm able to keep a calm, straight place. I'm able to get in and see people, get beyond their behaviors. Who are you? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? How can we help soothe those or amplify the positive ones and make you feel safe? And that's where I feel like I do more of that than I do like this, amazing, like, ooh, here's my back pocket tool. Yes! We just unlocked that piece of anxiety with this amazing socket wrench. that just opened that up. So We're going to come back to this. I'm going to get you out on time, or as close to time as I can. EI-woo-woo, because I said we'd get to it today and I can't pass it. This will be in the whole brain child, which, by the way, maybe start reading. If you want to spread it out a little bit farther, just start reading that a little bit. That's coming up here. But EI-woo-woo comes out of Dr. Siegel's work. And this is an actual story because he had a woman he had trained. She was a teacher, but she had gone to one of his trainings, and so she had learned about this neurobiology stuff. And there was a time where she got a phone call. She was at school and she got a phone call. And she said, I'm sorry, but there's been an accident. Your son has been in an accident. She had like a 2 or 3 year old son who had been riding with his nanny. And she ended up having a seizure while driving. And they were in an accident. They were like, he's okay, but we need you to come down here. So she left school and she went down. And she found the medics, and they said, we've checked him over. He seems okay. We're good to release him for you. I just want to let you know he keeps saying EI-woo-woo. We don't know what that means, but hoping maybe that you do. So she took him, and he was kind of saying to her EI-woo-woo. Well, as a parent, she was able to translate. Guess what the nanny's name was? Sophia. What did the child call Sophia? Yeah. And then think about the scenario. Woo-woo. Sirens, police cars, ambulance. What was the young boy trying to do?
Replicate the sound process.
Tell the story. Didn't have a lot of language. All he could, EI, woo-woo. Sophia was taken away in an ambulance. He's trying to tell the story. Now, what do a lot of parents do in that situation?
They try to talk for the kid, fill in the gaps, or do the baby talk thing.
Could be.
Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. Distract.
Don't think about it. You're okay now, and then never come back to the story. But this mother was trained differently. She knew the importance of telling the story of the grape, right? And processing through that. There's a story that came up earlier with Katie that we were talking about. And so she went home, and repeatedly the little boy would say EI-woo-woo. And she would keep expanding the story. Yes, you and Sophia were in an accident, and Sophia went to the hospital, right? But we just went and visited Sophia, and she's doing better, and she's going to come home soon, right? Uh-huh. And then he would say it again, and she would help him keep retelling the story because he wasn't old enough to have enough language to do it. But instead of saying, it's too traumatizing to keep talking about it, she was able to see what he went through, soothe him, help him feel safe, and help him to work through the trauma. Okay? So a lot of times, and this can often be done through play. That's what. A client on the spectrum, almost completely nonverbal. Jen, through sand play work, helped the client who cannot talk about things map out and create the story. And then she would ask questions, and he would kind of be able to, give her a little bit. So she found creative ways to help him process and tell the story and work through the challenges and relational dynamics that were problematic. Because, parents are divorced, so this was mom's house and this was dad's house, and bridges and, different things going on there. All right. So, the concept of telling the story. Next week, I'm going to introduce you to, actually, I might bring this in 2 weeks because I'm going to give you tools and techniques. So I gave you a background. We're going to talk about puzzles and the remote control. Those are two of my favorite storylines, neurobiological education and techniques to use in therapy to help unlock some of the storylines that people are wrestling to get to from traumatic experiences.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Go team.
I'll be there like